All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. And we'll call this meeting to order for June the 12th for MLPS. We're here at the headquarters. And disclosure of pecuniary interest. If anybody has any, please forward them to Paul. Minutes from the March 10th meeting of the MLPS Authority Board and the minutes from the closed session. Any questions is arising from that? Seeing none, need a motion to accept those minutes. Councillor Brennan, Councillor McGuire. All in favor? Carried, thank you. And our first action item, 4A WSIB liability growth and strategic response. And Bill, are you doing that one?
Yes, please.
Okay, go ahead.
So this is just our nice new logo on there, so that's good. That's the first thing to show you. Today I really want to talk about a challenge for the board to just explain just how big of a challenge we have with WSIB from a financial perspective. Talk a little bit about where I see that challenge going. And then I want to spend most of my time actually talking about our strategies to mitigate and the things that we've been doing over the last couple of months to try and really turn that challenge around. So in the report, there's a, I don't know what that next slide says, Paul, what does the next slide say? Oh, no, go back. So in the report, the basic story is this. You have a very significant financial challenge that we know from an actuarial perspective, and the volume in there in millions of dollars is, what is it, Adam? It's 14 or something, 14 point something. And we put additional funds this year in the 2025 budget. We put additional funds into the WSIB reserve, but we still have a pretty massive funding shortfall. Because we're around 6 and change, I think, now in millions of dollars. And so that's a significant shortfall with WSIB. And one of the things that I did was I asked for a new actuarial report on where we are, because that actuarial report is actually quite old, the one that we're working from, and there's no question that the challenge has gotten deeper. So unfortunately, I was hoping to have that for today's meeting. We're still working from the old report, but suffice it to say the problem isn't getting any easier, and I'll send around the new report to the board members as soon as we have it. But I expect to have it probably early to late next week, early or late next week, sometime next week anyways. So the real questions are, well, you have a problem, Bill. What can you do? Well, we've been stocking more money away whenever we can, but that's going to increasingly be harder to do to match this challenge. There's no way you're going to be able to tread water on this challenge by stocking money away. You have to take dramatic action in other areas. And so what we've been trying to do is look at why is it growing? And essentially it has a lot to do with our demographics. It definitely has some to do with the demographics of our population, of the people that work here. But it also has to do with the fact that we're going on more calls, and so more opportunities for WSIB, higher skill sets. We have higher challenging things that we're doing in the 911 system and all across the whole system. And we just have more employees as well. So not only did we have a historical problem with WSIB, not only from a mental health perspective, but from a physical health perspective, all reasons why we have employees. And I will tell anyone, I think this is the most challenging occupation in the public sector, being not my job, but being a paramedic is the most challenging. And it's no wonder that these cases of WSIB have grown as we've had more calls, asked our employees to do more things, and had more employees in the system. So the challenge isn't going away, there's no magic bullet, but what we've really tried to do is mitigate, and with a little bit of financial. And we're gonna update that information, but what we're really trying to do is try to focus on our employees and what we can do to make sure that we avoid WSIB in the first place. So the next slide, Paul, says it really focuses in on those employee supports. We're trying to, when you talk to the employees here, and I've talked to as many as I can so far, I've got a lot more work to do in that respect, but these opportunities to provide meaningful value to the organization through new programs that also provide supports, alternative work arrangements are really important. It's something we heard in union negotiations. It's something you hear when you talk to every employee almost about providing these different types of opportunities for whatever the challenge is that an employee might be facing. And so A lot of the work we're doing is on new programs, so. We can go into as much detail as you want, Brian, on any of these, but the interfacility transport program that you've already talked about at this board table. And that we're working through with the ministry right now is a huge component of where we see opportunities to provide alternative work arrangements compared to people going off on WSIB. I'll say this as politically correct as I can say it. I think generally here for a long time, there's been a reluctance to use alternative work arrangements. And a focus on being 100% ready to return to the 911 system. And Adam and I and Jessica have basically turned that on its head and said, what's the maximum we can do to help people stay in the workplace and return to the workplace? And what programs can we put in place to offer the opportunities to do that? Interfacility transports is a great opportunity for that. We have new, we can talk more about this, but we'll just say that we have an expedited onboarding process that's really helping to help keep people in the workplace. That's really exciting. We have new expanded CP initiatives that we're working on. We're actually going to talk to the city about some of that tomorrow. That would provide new opportunities to provide value to the community in terms of the service, but new alternative work options besides the 911 system for our employees. And then new patient care models that we've been working on. You know about some of those. You can go and look at the whiteboard in there and see that we have like 18 of them we're working on, where there's new opportunities for our medics that are highly skilled, highly motivated to work, wanna work, but because of a physical challenge, a mental challenge, or even just needing a rest sometimes from a bad call, aren't able to work in the traditional 911 system. And so all of these things are things that we're doing, and we can talk in as much detail as you want about it, Brian. The other thing that we're doing is trying to focus on, you have traditionally spent as much money as you can on keeping the service going in challenging times. Call volumes through the roof, offload delays through the roof. And then the complexity of the calls that you're getting has really increased the unit hour utilization as well. And so we have a busy system, and you have spent as much money as you can on keeping the lights on in that service and making sure we respond to all calls. At the detriment, in my view, and this is my fault too, like eventually you need to invest in all the employee supports that HR can provide and all the other types of supports that, and that's a real focus of what we're doing as well. And talk more about that. Graduated, return to work, I already talked about sort of this mindset that was here for a long time about having to be 100% able to return. We're finding other ways to return people to work in the system. Without it necessarily being 100% ready to return to work in the entire system. So we can talk more about that if you like. And then, of course, we finish it up with supports within the workplace. Resiliency training is massive to try and a lot of work has been done already. We have more work to do on resiliency training, but there's a lot of work that can take place in the workplace to help people so that they can avoid WSIB and avoid the PTSD challenges and of course physical injuries as well. It doesn't take much. I've met a lot of employees, and I met one employee. He's a guy like Mike. He's a big guy in shape, everything else, but
Another old guy.
It's recorded too,
big strong guy, works out all the time, can lift the truck, but it doesn't matter who you are. You can, a rotator cuff, a wrist. Did you get calls like this where you're going to get injured, and how do we help those employees in all those situations is what we think about every morning. Here is how we can be an employee-centered organization to address this. So Brian, we have a huge challenge. The report kind of puts that out there for you. Our idea is to not respond to it with simply putting more money into reserve. You'll never win that game. We have a lot of work to do, and we've got a lot of great programs in place, and we look forward to implementing even more of them, but that's the challenge. The message is you put 1.5 million away to support it this year. It'll never be enough to keep pace. We can't continue to do that. We have to focus on these things. I think that's it, Paul, in terms of slides.
Okay, questions from the group? Kathy?
You touched on it, just in like with maybe this is a question for, Jessica, maybe she's better able to answer it. But with the union negotiations and the buy-in about the return to work, do you feel that they're on side with that?
Well, the union negotiations conversations are about alternative work arrangements, which are
okay,
not
but-
quite the same as return to work, they're similar.
Okay, so I
But-
meant alternative, but getting them back to work in some form or fashion.
Absolutely, like, there's a whole bunch of reasons why we want that, a whole bunch of reasons why our employees want that. The great news about the work that we're doing around WSIB challenges and creating new opportunities for those folks are that they also create opportunities for alternative work arrangements for something that isn't WSIB related. It could be a bad call. It could be that you have could be something related to a pregnancy or some other situation that is in your personal life where you just need a rest, where you're not in the regular 911 system. All these challenges we have with WSIB also create opportunities to address the things that are being brought up by employees, both in negotiations and also in our conversations. But our primary focus, where we're investing all of our energy and time right now, is investing in addressing those WSIB challenges. The happy byproduct of that is it's also gonna create opportunities to address those other things. But definitely no reluctance to put these programs in place. In fact, they beg us for accommodation policies and everything else.
Mhm.
Do you wanna say anything about that?
Yeah, I think that a big part of the discussion around bargaining was around pregnancy accommodation. And how do we look at it more holistically and how to support women who are pregnant.
Mhm.
So, and that kind of goes with what Bill said in terms of alternative work arrangements and how do we look at that. So,
But our alternative, like what I'm really excited about is I've got a much deeper understanding of just how much of a mental challenge doing this very difficult job is
Mhm.
from all the conversations I've had. And that sort of just a change or being able to accommodate after a bad call, like that's the perfect world Adam and I want to get to. WSIB opportunities, avoiding WSIB opportunities provides that as well. But there's pregnancy, but this just needing a break or a relocation or a different type of assignment for a while, I think would really help with morale and also help with strengthening of total mental health in the organization. Adam, do you like, that's pretty well what you'd say about that?
I think there's a transitional period too, so when with the proof of concept as the WSIB measures start to work, we have the opportunities to also leverage those same principles and those same programs and initiatives to be able to help provide the supports to the staff for the other issues such as needing a break or pregnancy.
And in a certain respect, we already have a few of those, right? Like the NICU program is an opportunity to not necessarily, we have a couple of programs where you don't necessarily have to be in the 911 system. And it works for some folks, but we need the flexibility here. Adam and I need the flexibility here and Jessica need it. If we're really gonna address this, we need flexibility in what the options are for employees, and we're halfway down that trail and running as fast as we can to full way down that trail.
But I think to your point, the buy-in from the employees is the big part too. Kathy, you and
Just a follow-up and, looking deeper than I need to, but I guess I'm just a little concerned about needing a break. Like, what does that mean?
Oh, I'll give you a really good
Well,
example.
no, like, I think I know what that means, like, it's not just, I think I know where you're headed with it. But just for me, the phrase needing a break seems a little flippant, so I also wouldn't want it, like.
To be interpreted that way.
Yeah,
no.
and for it to become I don't know,
No,
be abused.
no, this is more of sort of that mental holiday from after, like, there's terms that I think are used in industry, like needing a break, that don't mean
Yeah,
the way you
okay,
were starting to describe it. Adam, like, we had a very difficult, challenging set of calls, as you know, in the Thorndale multiple vehicle accident. And, there's real world examples we could walk you through some other time where we're looking at maybe the challenges that we see when we do the after discussions from these. We have a full briefing and we do a full after discussion with the employees as a group, where maybe just a reassignment for a little while is enough. And it doesn't have to be a full-blown WSIB. So that's kind of the language I was trying to use, and it's more I think that's a colloquialism that's used in the industry, but Adam, you just described it a little better than I did.
Yeah, the concept, the employees tend to, under some of the stressors, there's different stress points that people would potentially have.
Mhm.
Before an employee, or a paramedic needs to be, or needs to find, respite out of the workplace, there's the possibility for reassignment within the workplace as just part of the resiliency that they can build up. So they're working on the resiliency, and if we have an opportunity to relieve some of the stress momentarily for them, to allow them to realign and recalibrate and stay within the workplace, it's better for the employee. They don't have to worry about being removed from the workplace, and they're able to be able to move through what it is that's causing those stressors. So with whether it's peer support, and it gives the opportunity for critical intervention to start providing some additional supports for them before we end up with an occupational stress injury that would potentially remove them from the workplace for a longer period of time. So it's another way that we can kind of help the employee, without having to just, previously it would be you're into the 911 system and you're into a busy system and it's there or nowhere. And if we can find additional places where they can actually have that moment to, recover from the exposure or the experience they had, we'll be able to provide greater support for the employee, and potentially also the longevity in the career. That's also of a concern, because again, we have to, like, there's cumulative stress that comes with all of this. So we're looking at these things down in the future.
Yeah.
We're investing a lot in our employees as well. Like you saw in the budget this year, we're spending a lot of money in education and training. And so this idea of having a long career is something we're really interested in too, especially considering the demographics of our group. So it's also another factor for alternative employment as well. So we're on the right path. Lots of work to do, Brian. And I'll get you more information on the depth of the challenge. But I also wanna take a beat and see how some of these initiatives work. And how well they're, and then we'll have to go deeper if we have to, and we'll have to do more and more options. But this is what we have to do.
Any other question? Susan?
I just have one, so does the alternative work in these other job descriptions that you've come up with, does that free up a complement to be able to rehire frontline 911 service, or is that not an issue for here? Where if you've got somebody out on WSID, you may be not able to rehire that position?
Oh, okay, we need to talk about that one, go ahead.
So if we have somebody that's out of the workplace, so if we have a paramedic that's out of the workplace, that person would then be replaced through a temporary contract, for example. So what we're looking for is, if they're out on WSIB, they typically be removed completely from the workplace. Is there a way for us to bring them back into the workplace to allow them to recover, provide, meaningful work for them, and help them, reacclimate and recondition back into the workplace sooner?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah, because if we can get meaningful work that they're doing in an alternative program that provides a benefit, like all the programs we're talking about are things that are benefiting the 911 program, benefiting the community, and we're doing that anyways. It's just a much more efficient use of our resources to do it that way than it is to just have them off on WSIB as well. So everybody wins, I think.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That's great.
Any other questions or comments on this report? Seeing none, we need a motion to accept the report. Susan, Mike, all in favor? Carried. I just thought about that, shouldn't be using the counselor
No.
here at this board, so I'll the next one is MLPS legislative background and governance overview.
Yeah, I'm gonna just kick this off and then I'll turn it over to Paul. The reason this is here is twofold. One, it's for board education, because I think there's been times where, like, all of us have had conversations like, what is my role and responsibility? Because it has fluctuated a lot over the last 4 years, 5 years. That's one reason. The other reason is, I've been in these conversations I'm having with employees, I keep saying, well, our board is more engaged and they're closer to you now. And they go, what does that mean? How different is it? So trust me, there's lots of employees listening to our board meetings, and I think it's a lot for them as well to understand just how close you now are and how in control you are of everything here. Like I know it's not technically a corporate board, but it's acting like a corporate board where you have greater responsibilities, because they say, hey, Bill, what's changed lately? Like all of a sudden it feels like it's there's more responsibility on as opposed to somewhere else on Rideout Street. And that is the case. So I thought this would be a good opportunity. And then it's gonna lead in, as I said to you in one of my emails, it's gonna lead into our discussion about finance. Cause Susan, you had some great questions at another meeting about reserves and finance and how all that works. And then we're gonna talk about administrative structure. So we're gonna start off way back in 98 with governance changes. Yeah, 98, and then work our way forward all the way to present day where we wanna go with administration, with finance in the middle of the sandwich. Okay, Paul?
I would just add, it also puts together like a comprehensive resource on the history of MLPS and how it came to be from MLEMS. So it's great for a number of reasons on a go forward basis. And as we prepare to move into the oncoming budget, it's good to have all this with the next presentation we go to. And definitely the written report goes in much more detail on like every single legislative instrument that's been utilized over time. So again, good resource to have. I'll skip the overview, but it is just the background service provision, and then the big takeaway is the current org structure, roles and responsibilities, and moving into the next presentation. So not to belabor the point too much, but the who does what panel led to the provincial local services realignment and amendments to the Ambulance Act. Municipalities became designated delivery agents for land ambulance, and Middlesex County was designated by ministerial order to deliver the service for Middlesex and the City of London. And MLPS operates under the county's authority through a municipal service board established by county bylaw. Okay. And then what's important to remember is the CMSM, which we're currently dealing with on the council side of the relationship with the City of London, is that we enter into cost apportionment agreements for the provision of the service. The city pays the municipal portion of expenses based on an 85% weighted assessment and 15% call location. And I could say that is intended to remain the same on a go forward basis. That hasn't been something proposed to be changed going forward. And that is only the municipal portion though. So the county administers all provincial funding agreements and reporting obligations. However, that's done with ultimate sign off by the CEO and the Director of Paramedic Services filed through the various systems. So service provision, just history. It was contracted to Thames EMS. In 2011, a consultant's report recommended a commission or board model that would be arm's length. And in the report, it sort of details why that was recommended at the time. And then MLEMSA was established in 2011. And then there's been 4 revisions to the county establishing bylaws, evolving how the model has grown. And then within the staff report, there's written analysis on what each of those changes were to the bylaws. And now, present day, the model includes a CEO-led structure with a Director of Paramedic Services reporting to the CEO. So that evolved from the shared model over time. And then just going through, I think this is a big takeaway for the report. So the roles and responsibilities with the legal basis behind it. So again, if anyone ever needs to reference, but the province sets the legislative and regulatory framework, issues the certificate of authorization, which MLPS just completed again last year. Funds, we say approximately 50% of prior year approved expenditures, because there's some nuances about capital and all that fun stuff that we'll get into in the finance report. And maintains dispatch and clinical certification authority. The County of Middlesex is ultimately the designated delivery agent, holds all financial, legal, and operational accountability, maintains the current reserves, capital assets, and reporting obligations. And that goes back to the time of Thames EMS, where to ensure service continuity, if Thames ever rolled up, everything would transfer over to the county to continue delivering services. Middlesex County Council retains legislative authority, appoints MLPS board members, and approves establishing bylaws and the MLPS budget and MLPS terms of reference. The City of London is not a delivery agent, but is a funding partner through the CMSM and shares in those costs. The Authority Board provides oversight and governance of MLPS, recommends budget and policy, and enacts MLPS governance bylaws. And then MLPS, the entity, has operational delivery of paramedic services, public education, and community paramedicine. I would go a step further and say with the additional funding agreements, that also expands the scope into CPLTC Plus and all the other great programs that MLPS delivers. And then going into sort of the rules that are identified within the current creation bylaw in terms of reference, the CEO is appointed by the board, leads corporate strategy and administrative strategy, and reports to the MLPS board. And the Director of Paramedic Services is appointed by the CEO through the MLPS board and oversees clinical and operational delivery and ensures compliance with the Ministry of Health and our funding agreements. So the organizational structure took its most recent evolution in 2024, where it transitioned from a chief-led model to a CEO-led model. The current structure includes the CEO reporting to the board, as was noted before, contracted support services, finance, HR, legal, strategic initiatives currently remain within the county structure. And the latest revisions to the organizational structure noted it supports clearer governance, administrative and operational autonomy and accountability. So those lines of responsibility. Again, this was to be the bedrock to move forward on for future discussions, and my personal preference is to continue to enhance our budget based on what we had last year. But the next presentation will focus on sort of financial structures, an overview of all the MLPS accounts and reserve management, how that financial stewardship aligns with the county's role as delivery agent, and how the nuances between the county and MLPS work, the relationship with the Ministry of Health and Ministry of Long-Term Care for all the various funding programs. And it will just continue to support a deeper understanding of fiscal responsibilities and governance alignment as we move forward into that budget process. And I think that's sort of the main overview, to be a resource and a bedrock on a go-forward basis.
And two things, Brian, we're gonna give you these presentations, so they'll be attached publicly as well, this material, so you have it as a bedrock foundation. And then the other thing was, I haven't really heard a better description than Councillor Grantham at Middlesex County, whenever he said, I'm paraphrasing, but he said, so basically, Bill, the way it works is the board's responsible for the service, and we're responsible for appointing the board and approving the budget at county council. And I said, I couldn't have said it like, that's what that boils down to, is where we are today. And then with all what Paul and I have given you here today is all the sort of legislation that leads to that sort of grand conclusion.
Questions?
Thanks, Chair. I'll comment. A great report, really sets out things in a timeline as to, I guess, why we're here and how we got here. Yeah, how we got here and why we're here, but I really starting to see things paying off in some of our more recent decisions with the CEO led model. Thank you. And then with the director, the chief, looking after all the operations, and I just, I'm looking at our agendas over the last little while, and I see a vast difference as to how points of view are coming across from the administration end of things compared to like an operational administration end of things. And so it's a great progress that we've gone through. I think it's really going to bear some good fruit.
And the other reason to do this report, Brian, is because I thought it was really fair to tell you as board members, hey, you have some changed responsibilities from almost what you signed up for. Like, in the original days, you have a lot of power now and you have a lot of responsibility. And
I think responsibility is a great word for it, more so than power. I think of responsibility, I like that word better than power.
Yeah, well, you have both, like in terms of your ability to control the direction of the organization that wasn't there before. And I think from the employee's perspective, what we need to do now is do a better job of communicating that, involve the board more in some of the relationships that we have there, so they know sort of that we are an employee-centered organization and you folks are closer. Whereas before it was 10 people way over there, it just feels closer to them now.
There's no comparison. Let's just make a comment to that. No comparison. 14, when I came on the advisory board compared to now, there's no comparison in the role that we have.
We just gotta get better at it and get more time into the structure.
I think you keep sending out these updates every couple of weeks to keep us abreast of what's going on. I think that's beneficial for the board to see those, because it keeps us up to date on what's happening. So I think that's really beneficial too.
Yeah.
Okay, I do have, I think that's a work in progress though, right? To some of your points talking about, you know, the budgeting and all of those things, there's some work to do. I don't think any of us on the board, and maybe you can't say, where are we right now on our budget? Like, what's our budget right now? Where are we sitting?
It's gonna be exciting.
How much of our budget have
We'll get to all the finance stuff
Yeah.
for sure at the next meeting,
Okay,
but there, with any change. In any organization, you're gonna have a lot of different moving parts. And it takes people a little bit of time to be able to get understanding what those parts are, like
Yeah.
we're still dealing with like even like T-pond reports. Who does those? Does the county do those? Do we do those? This is a fundamental model change that we have here, and we're gonna work through it, and we'll get there. The trick is not to try and just say, on this date, this is how it's gonna work. We're transitioning to this, and that's what the report that we're gonna do for the next meeting is gonna really help with.
okay. Right, any other questions and comments on this? Paul wants to kick me under the table, he's too far away. Your fault for sitting so far away from me.
I enjoyed that example.
If there's no other questions, we need a motion to accept this report. Susan, Kathy, all in favor? Carried, thank you. Our next one is, the remount initiative. And Adam, that's yours.
Terrific, thank you. I have a few updates to provide, and this will be the first of those. To pick, or just as a reminder, or where we left off. Ontario had some significant challenges with receiving actual ambulances. This is something that is across all of the paramedic services. Having only one vendor for ambulances provided in Ontario serves a significant challenge. We have been able to successfully bring in a secondary vendor to be able to start providing ambulances, but we still have the catch up that we have to do. As that process starts to move along, we look to implement a new strategy as opposed to just ordering brand new ambulances, where we have upwards of a 24-month lag on that. Ordering today, taking receipt of it in 2 years, creates additional challenges. Carrying a fleet that's a lot older, more maintenance costs that come with that, the downtime that comes with that, the movement back and forth, the frustration into the front line, it goes on and on the list. With the remount strategy we have, or initiative, we have the ability to take ambulances, have them renewed on the inside. Anything is that needed to be updated is completely replaced and updated. So that would take what would be referred to as the box, so the outer side of the patient compartment, and it takes that, it creates basically a brand new box, and it puts it onto a brand new chassis. So the original manufacturer visited MLPS, identified 10 ambulances that would be classified as donor ambulances, and those have since gone back to the manufacturer so that the box could be removed, completely renewed. And we're anticipating those by the end of 2025 and then early 2026. So that's a significant turnaround time for us compared to before, and there are significant cost savings that come with that. And then additionally, there's significant reduction into the carbon footprint of replacing an entire ambulance as opposed to just, reusing the largest portion of that ambulance.
Adam, so you won't really have a number what we save because each one will be different depending what has to be removed, correct?
Yes, on average, they're between $70,000 and $90,000 of savings per ambulance. So we'd be looking anywhere between $700,000 and $900,000 savings for this 1 year.
Questions on this? John?
A while ago, I'm thinking back, I don't know how long it was, but either Colin or Kelly had designed a new style ambulance that a different vendor could make. Has that gone anywhere?
Yeah, so that was the secondary vendor that I was referring to.
Okay.
So that vendor is called TriStar. TriStar is a company that's out in the Maritimes. So what we had done a year and a bit ago was we started working with TriStar to gain certification in Ontario. It's a lengthy process. So we worked with them to design what the prototype would look like. And then they went through different iterations. They visited here a few times and we worked with them. We actually took receipt of that. So we have that ambulance sitting here down in our garage right now. We're just waiting on the final approval from the ministry specifically for the radio system. So it's received complete certification. And everything is set to go. There's just one minor the one last little piece for it is the ministry has to sign off on its own radio system to be put into the ambulance, and that should be, we're told, any day now. So,
Good.
so that, and all the other paramedics or a lot of the other paramedic services are excited to see this as well. Having an additional vendor within Ontario is a significant advancement for us, so.
Kathy.
What's the turnaround time on that company? Do they, like, is it still, will it still be the
Pres-
18 months to 2 years or?
No, presently they're under a year for their term, for their
This-
delivery time.
this other
The
company.
TriStars is presently, they're manufacturing, the volumes of ambulances that they produce don't quite match what Crestline produces.
Mm,
However, as they start to gain
Business
more
day.
business, they're going to increase. Right now, they're based in Nova Scotia. They're into the Ontario market. They've received certification here. And now, because we have the one ambulance that's here, the other paramedic services, so we've hosted them a few times to come here to MLPS to see that ambulance. So they can actually see, touch, crawl through it, bring people to actually visualize what it is. And now they can be potentially putting in their orders. So we're anticipating that the TriStar, they're going to max out the number of ambulances they can deliver in this year or here, and then we'll see that start to increase. So.
Any other questions on that?
One great news.
Seeing none, we need a motion. John, Mike, all in favor? Carried, thank you. 4D, the resiliency training. Adam, that's yours.
Another update with the resiliency training, we've talked many times about providing supports. Even earlier in the meeting, we were talking about some of the resilience that we want to see and increase that capacity within the staff. We do have a fairly significant and robust peer support team. We have early clinical intervention for significant calls that take place, but we also wanted to find a way to provide some education training, some coping mechanism, and some resiliency to paramedics to potentially prevent those traumatic injuries that they would potentially suffer. The resiliency program, it was designed specifically for emergency medical services. It's been used within Australia and the UK. It was designed by a clinical psychologist with their paramedic services, using artificial intelligence even within the way that they help design that program. With all of that, we've managed to go through half of our staff, we're halfway through the program administration of that. All of the peer support and all the frontline supervisors have already or have had a chance to receive their training. And what it's shown so far is a 12% increase in the resiliency that those members have had. So we're seeing significant success with that program.
And who's running that program?
The company is referred to as Driven Resilient First. So we're not administering it ourselves.
No, I'm just
Yeah.
wondering now.
Yeah.
Who's putting that for? Questions? Comments? I mean, the obvious is that's good news. I'm glad to hear. So when is it planned for the other half? When are you?
It's continuously ongoing.
Yeah, so when are you hoping that everybody's gone through it, I guess?
By the end, we hope that we're done by the end of the summer. So there's some interactive participation that's also done through the frontline staff. So we're also making sure that everybody has the opportunities to go through there. In the summer times, we have multiple open sessions for people to be able to do that. So we want to afford everybody an opportunity to be able to participate in that. So it's open to all staff, not just the frontline party.
Okay. Perfect. Questions, comments? Seeing none, need a motion to accept that report. Kathy, Mike, all in favor? Carried. The next one, the MCAD and the iPad. Okay. Adam, that's yours.
This is an exciting update to be able to provide to as well. Those two items, the MCAD and the iPads, go together within some of our modernization that we want to, or that we were looking to be able to implement. The iPads, they replace some or more antiquated laptops. Traditionally, what we would see in the mapping systems for the paramedics and their routing systems in the front of the ambulances were fairly expensive, rugged, laptops that they would use. They were difficult to use. They weren't really very user friendly for the paramedics, and they were limited in what they could be able to do. By implementing iPads, we produced a much bigger screen. It's easier to read, but then also that opened up the ability for us to implement and deploy a much more sophisticated software. The software is referred to as MCAD. When we look at traditionally, we want to be able to use our data, moving it back and forth. One of the big frustrations that paramedics would also feel is some of the communications that they would receive between from the time that they receive the call, between the dispatcher and the time that they actually arrive at the call, it is all based on the capacity that the dispatchers have, the number of calls that are going out, and their ability to actually radio and relay that information to the paramedics. The MCAD system is it's designed and maintained by the Ministry of Health. So we were able to deploy it into the vehicles through the iPads, which allows information to flow directly from the dispatch center. So through their CAD system, it can actually it actually shows up onto the iPad for the paramedics, so they can see call details that are there. They can get their routing information that automatically populates into Google Maps or Waze, and will route them to the scene in the most appropriate and the fastest route, so we can improve our response times. We can reduce risk for the paramedics. We bring down their cognitive load with that, and then we give them access to more call details, including any caution or flags that would potentially be there, or any hazards that come along with that. The system is by far more sophisticated than what they've ever had option to them before. So this is a modernization for us to do that, and in so doing, we do manage to see the iPads moving into the system are not only are they more advanced and more sophisticated to be able to run this program, they're also significantly less than the Toughbook computers that we would be looking at.
And more easily replaced if they get damaged.
Yeah, we're looking at a $900 for an iPad replacement compared to $6,000 for the mapping computer.
You can imagine.
I remember when they purchased those laptops, and yeah, that was a pretty big bill for.
And the only thing Adam didn't mention, and it's kind of in this report, is huge shout out to the logistics team, Adam, because they just did amazing work to get this in place in record time, right? So you want to talk about that for a second?
Yeah, so there was a lot of a lot of work that took place in order to get this done and rolled out. And the ministry actually did make special mention to the service to being able to do that. Part of that was also with the logistics team being able to make sure that they were able to go around and hit all of the ambulances within a short period of time to do actual real-time updates to the applications for us to go live. So we were considering the size of our service to be able to go live. Usually most services will do it in a transitional period, which is difficult for the paramedics. It's difficult for the dispatch centers when you do this transition. But even with our size, we were able to go live across all of our vehicles simultaneous. At 5 a.m. we just went live with everything, but we had to do that very strategically by being able to plan when the iPads went into the vehicles and when the applications were updated, so that they could actually receive the information and we could go live at this flip of the switch.
Yeah, really great teamwork across the board.
Yeah.
To that point, logistics has evolved. It's still evolving, I know, but has evolved so much.
It's really nice, Brian, for Adam and I to sit in the boardroom and think up ideas, and knowing that we can just say, okay, here's what we need to happen, and then they go and plan like they did for this and figure out how, and come back with first in province type answers, right? So it's really impressive the work they're doing.
We don't talk about the logistics team very much here, but it's really evolved.
Yeah.
Evolving, I should say. Questions, comments from the group?
I can imagine how much that changes their world.
No pressure that day.
How up to date is that, like on construction and stuff? How up to date is that information?
It's running through Waze and Google Maps, so those are updated consistently. So
Okay. The reason I asked, the reason I asked is 2 fire trucks were on Wellington when I turned off of 401. 2 fire trucks coming in, it's like, I don't know where you guys think you're going, but you're not going down Wellington. 2 lanes lined away. So, yeah, that's what I wondered.
He used the term game changer, I think, in that report.
Yeah.
And it really is a massive game changer.
So that was some of the input that we had back from the front line when we finally implemented this software and these iPads, was that it's a game changer. This is one of those ones where we have multiple wins that are across this. yes, there's cost savings, but there's also reduction or we position ourselves to be able to reduce our response times, provide increased safety for the paramedics, improve service for the actual patients themselves. I mean, we're going to, the user interface is better for the paramedics. There's wins that come over all around. So
Sounds like dispatch might like it too, so then they can just focus on incoming and not.
and that is another huge benefit. Dispatch does like that because they don't have to worry about providing those additional over the air times. And now this leads into the next update that we have, but these are kind of linked together with the EPCR softwares. We've talked before in previous years about bidirectional data. The dispatch centers and the Ministry of Health likes to control their information. We would like all of our information, but they will share large portions of it with us. But we want to be able to pull as much information we can and put it into our EPCRs and vice versa. We want the information to flow back and forth. By using and leveraging a ministry designed and maintained piece of software, that opens up the ability for us to be able to start moving back and forth through the bidirectional data. And once we see all of the services transition to a new dispatching triage software called MPDS, we also then open the abilities for anybody using this MCAD system to move towards something referred to as silent dispatching. When they're looking into this MCAD system, the paramedics have more control over the inputs of their time. So they can actually use touch inputs on the iPads to indicate that they've arrived seen or they've departed, and they can put those inputs in without having to rely on radio transmissions. So that increases more airtime. And then, as you mentioned, less frustration for the dispatchers. That's also less frustration for the paramedics waiting for the airtime to provide their important updates.
Yeah, you said something about cognitive load, you know, if you're a dispatch and you're taking,
Yep.
don't know much about it, but you think you've got to get information out as well, but if you can just.
Well, on both sides,
On
because
both
both sides
sides.
directions, it's
Yep.
And that's something one of the things you've been looking for a while,
Yes.
right? Looking for that information. Yeah.
Yeah, which increases customer care too.
Exactly.
Anything else on that software? That's
No, I think
pretty well. Any other questions on that? No, we get a motion to accept those two reports. Susan and Kathy, all in favor? Carried.
Hope everybody likes change around here.
You know, it's,
Sounds good.
I have to say, people are, they say hi in Lawrence, you know. It's very, it seems a very, good atmosphere. Western University Homecoming, HOCO.
No, software, isn't it? Software. we're putting-
No, I asked if there's anything else on this. Do you have anything
Oh,
else
for
on
the-
the software?
for the EPCR software.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Go ahead,
can.
sorry.
I can roll into the EPCR software. So the current vendor that we had, the length of our contract was ending on the current or the present EPCR software that we're running right now. The contract was ending on that particular piece of software. So that paperwork that we were using for the ambulance call reports was no longer being serviced. And they were being introduced to something new, which pushed us into a position for RFP. We selected the successful vendor. That contract has been executed and we're into the planning phases for that. So now that we have been over the last few weeks, including with ITS, working through the onboarding pieces to get those together. We have enough of it that we will be able to start releasing some information to the staff and some education and some training. We can start planning those pieces together. The software itself from a patient care record, that's something that paramedics will interact with consistently throughout the day. So if it's a functional piece of software, it can alleviate a lot of stress for them. But if it's not, it can create a lot of stress. It's also an extremely important piece of software because it delivers and it maintains all of our patient care records. So the particular software that we have is designed to really alleviate all of those stressors that we see. It provides more modern inputs and feedbacks, and it makes it much easier for them to navigate through. They can do that through touch devices such as iPads. They could technically do it on their iPhone if they wished.
Any other questions to that? Is it more foolproof, for lack of a better term?
Sorry,
More foolproof, for lack of a better term, you know?
Well, the
Yes.
user interface. I think.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we're looking at that as well, the paperwork side of that. So in order to do paramedics are required to do ambulance call reports
Yeah.
for anytime they arrive on scene and for all other patient interactions. So they're doing multiple forms throughout the course of their shift, and there's a lot of paperwork that has to go with it. And there is potential for error. And error on patient records poses risk for the service, it poses risk for the paramedics themselves, and they're conscientious of that. This new software, as far as the foolproof piece, absolutely. There's more ways to design in through those to create the safety nets where those errors won't potentially happen because of the way that the software is, it's customizable to MLPS. Whereas many other software providers that would put out an EPCR, it's the same EPCR without the customizations across all of the potential clients. Whereas the structure is the same, but what we have can be different than any of the other services. So we can make it very much geared to MLPS. So when we put the software out, we will hear over the course of 6, 8, 12 months from the paramedics what works, what doesn't work. We actually have the power ourselves to affect the change that we need to make it sophisticated and stop any or help mitigate and prevent some of those mistakes.
Questions?
No,
Susan?
just or I guess
Okay.
a question, but it sounds like it might help you attract and retain talent as well, like having all these new systems.
Yes, that's also something that we're very conscientious of, and that's 100% true.
No one wants to graduate learning all the new stuff and then go into a dinosaur system.
No.
And so that we're really mindful of that, actually.
Yeah.
Any other questions on that? Any motion? John, it's your turn. Mike, all in favor? Now, we'll go to Western University Homecoming.
So Western Homecoming, it's an annual event. The Western Homecoming event had over time created another event that was referred to as FOCO at one point, but that FOCO event has now digressed back into just being homecoming. Or what the tradition has stemmed itself into is a large party that takes place on the last Saturday of the homecoming weekend. Or what had been in the past was a party that was contained to Roughdale for a good chunk of the time from the morning to kind of the late afternoon. That party has since evolved, or the event has since evolved, where we see, or what we've seen over the course of time is it's now moved into some of the residential streets that surround that generalized area, and even most recently onto the other side of Richmond into some of those residential areas as well, and taking a time period that spans almost 24 hours. So as the event evolves, there's also our reaction and our planning has to evolve as well. What that comes with it is there's challenges and pressures that would be imposed upon MLPS from that, and apart from the high risk behaviors that take place at this event, there's also then now the considerations of our normal 911 responses into the communities in which that event spills out into. When we looked at it, having it on Broughdale, that was largely student housing. We would be able to protect the 1 or 2 the 2 or 3 houses within that street that were just held by residential citizens that were outside of the Western community. But now if we're looking at it being on Epworth and Regent and Huron streets that surround that generalized area, there's still residents that have potentially medical emergencies, and our responses into those areas are challenged based on that. So we have to adapt the way that we would respond because of the event. As well, we can see additional street closures and difficulties navigating in that general area for other responses that would potentially be up in the north side of the city. With all of that, we want to make sure that we don't have an event that overwhelms our system and we don't have enough units or ambulances that are available to respond to the normal 911 calls. So we do work closely with the City of London, which includes police, fire, and Western University as well, to create a generalized operational plan and look through the mitigation strategies that we can to deal with that particular event, so that we can manage what happens during the homecoming event, as well as being able to protect the 911 system for our normal calls, and then liaise and work with LHSC so that we're able to ensure that our energy ambulances that are transporting in are also returned back into the system as well, so that we can reduce the level of impact as much as possible. So we've started the planning.
Does the planning ever stop though with that?
For about-
Realistically,
for
right?
about a week and a half,
Yeah.
and we start again.
Other questions? I mean, it's a bit of a monster to say the least. I know you've worked with that on all the first responders are dealing with that, but have we had any any record of injuries from first responders at that event?
Have we had any first responders injured?
Injured at that event?
We haven't had any significant injuries.
Are you talking about just paramedics?
No, first responders.
Oh, generally, yeah, I don't know.
Because I assume that if there's something happens, you're gonna be dealing with, if it's a
We-
fire
we've-
department or the police.
Yeah, nothing significant that we've been made aware of.
Yeah.
There'd be minor injuries that rolled ankles or, those types of injuries, but we haven't had anything.
Okay.
There have been significant injuries within the general populace from those events.
Yeah, some geniuses that jump off a roof and land on a pillow. Those type of things. Yeah, there's not much you can say about that, but anyways, I'll leave that alone. Unless somebody else. Any other comments?
I know, I think so.
That's
right.
Anything else on that? So that is homecoming weekend always, of course.
Yeah.
And are you still meeting? You're still meeting before each event, I know.
Yes.
And then after to talk about how things went, correct?
Yes, we have staged meetings that
Yeah.
lead up to the event. They get more frequent as we get closer to the event. And then after the event, we have a debrief to see, what worked well, what didn't, what changes did we see, how did the event evolve this time versus the last time? So that then we can, as you say, the planning never really stops. That way we can start looking at making sure we captured what we did for this event, how it changed from what we anticipated, so that we can apply it to the future.
Go ahead.
Like I think over the years, like it's great to have this planning. I think it has evolved. Initially, maybe not every partner was at the table, and it's great to have all those involved at the table. So that's good. And I do think it's important, and I think it does happen after every event when there's a media story about the cost of the event to our residents. From an MLPS standpoint, from a fire department standpoint, police services, like it's the general public that's paying for this.
Okay.
And yet not, and it's affecting like either through your tax bill, you're getting a ding for it, or because maybe you're gonna have a delay if you have to phone 911. So I think it's important that media communication still continue to happen after each event, so everybody knows.
Susan.
Was the move away from FOCO to one event guided at all, or are we just responding to what's happening?
So kind of a bit of a back story then. So originally a party started at the or on that last Saturday. It started with a street party. The street party one year turned in 2015. It turned larger than anticipated, and there were approximately 10,000 students that descended onto a small little street that has about 350 meters long. Western University tried to help manage some of that by moving the homecoming weekend. If you recall, homecoming weekend was moved further into October, thinking that if it was moved closer to exams, it was not necessarily associated with homecoming. That party would not take place in that particular manner. Some of the students thought, well, we're going to create a fake homecoming, hence FOCO, and then that kind of stuck, and that was it kind of lit a fire where now other schools would send students down as well. So we would see other universities sending people as far as from Queens would be coming down, and like there'd be competitions about
on Queen.
you knew I was going.
I knew you were.
So we would
invited them, Bill.
Yeah.
So we would see that increase. The 1 year when it hit its pinnacle peak, we saw in excess of 35,000 students or 35,000 partygoers on Broughdale, which was a massive group. We had COVID that provided a bit of relief, but we still saw 4,000 or 5,000 people on Broughdale during COVID. Then the following years, as it started to ramp up, it moved off of Broughdale, and then we saw it transition down into Huron Street, and that's when we saw some of the evolutions that came along with that. And that's where we're at now, where we're seeing it starting to increase in volume, as well as the duration. So from an MLPS perspective, even when we had it in the previous years when it was on Broughdale, we still had increased volumes throughout the course of the night. So the Broughdale side of that or piece of that would end. So if it was 4 or 5 o'clock, students would disperse off of Broughdale. We would still see increasing call volume within the downtown core. We still do see that, and that brings with it some of the other issues that we see, like more recently, we're starting to see shootings and stabbings that fall along with that, increasing, people getting hit by cars as they're crossing across the streets, not paying attention. So that's how we kind of evolved to where we are now.
Well, there's nothing else other than talking about the event itself. We'll get a motion to accept. Susan, Kathy, all in favor? Carry. Next one is CAC.
This is also a good news story for us. The current system right now that the London CAC, which is controlled by the Ministry of Health, uses for triaging calls. When calls are coming in through the 911 system, they have to determine and assign a response priority to it, being code 1, 2, 3, or 4. That's done through a triaging tool that's referred to as DPCI2. That tool is antiquated and has a history of over triaging. So that's where we would go out as a code 4, but we're coming back a much lower priority. The ministry recognized that and is moving people and transitioning their CAC systems over to MPDS. MPDS has been proven in the emergency response community for a long period of time, and it's very reliable and it's very accurate. London CAC is unique in that there's many different services that fall within the London CAC's purview, which put it down towards one of the later ones or one of the later CACs to be transitioned into MPDS. We had an opportunity last year to speak with the Minister of Health and the Deputy Premier about that transition period. We've seen that transition period move up by 6 months. So we're looking at October of 2026 to being able to move over to MPDS. Not only will that improve our response times, that also opens up other avenues and easier avenues for us to further modernize and improve the way that we deliver our responses. So our deployment can change based on what's available or how MPDS triages calls. So this is a good thing for us. There's no significant work for MLPS to do as far as the implementation of MPDS, but we will have to start planning for some of the training and education that goes with that. The system is drastically different from what paramedics here would be used to when they're here, their calls going out code 1, 2, or 3, or 4, and there will be significant training and education for them to get used to and understand what it is that they're working in the system and why those calls are being triaged the way they are.
So but the big thing is more accurate.
More accurate
Coming to the paramedics, coming to MLPS.
More accurate information coming to MLPS through that triaging tool. So it provides benefit for the service, it provides benefit for the paramedics, and it provides benefit for the patients. By having more accurate information, if we can send out code 3 calls as code 3 without lights and sirens, that leaves other ambulances available for those lights and sirens. So when we have in our deployment plan about how we're going to respond to those life-threatening emergencies versus the urgent emergencies. So lights and sirens versus no lights and sirens can make the difference between having an ambulance available for that lights and sirens call when it's needed, as opposed to being already reallocated. So either it's when they're waiting longer because another ambulance has to come a greater distance. But then also from our staffing perspective as well, it provides us a better or greater benefit to help getting their staff off on time, which is also a significant pressure for them. So if we can control their resources better through MPDS, we're able to make sure that they're going onto the calls when they need to go onto the calls.
So just for a turnover, is that going to give us more consistency?
Yes.
As well, because I won't go to a personal situation, I mean, but I've seen they over triage sometimes where you've seen that, as you point out, but then where it's under triage or it's.
Exactly.
And so, okay.
Yeah.
As we get more experience, we'll be able to demonstrate that the situation you're talking about is going to happen much less likely than it does under the previous system.
Yeah, I'm not trying to bring a personal.
No, but
it's just the inconsistency, I guess, is what I'm.
We see system strains because of the over triage.
Yes.
If there's a lot more calls that are coming in being triaged as a priority 4 when they could otherwise be triaged as a priority 3. We decrease and deplete the number of ambulances we have available in the systems.
That's right.
So then when another priority 3 call comes in, there's no ambulance to respond to it. Whereas if they had all been triaged as priority 3s when they needed to be, the ambulances would be more readily available to go to those other calls.
But if I may, one more, but just to. Seriously though, there's people that call in and they know the right things to say too. Correct, like I can say, I can make a call, if I say the right things, that's gonna be a higher priority. Right, I mean, that's just a reality, right?
Yep.
That can happen, but.
Well,
okay.
this triage tool is designed to be better at that, right? To be better at helping to understand what priority it is, and that's a huge advantage of this particular tool, right?
Okay, I think it's a great tool.
Mhm.
Comments, questions? Was it just me?
Oh, no. I have lots of comments, but I won't be.
You won't make them?
I just can hardly wait for October 2026.
Right, yeah, just, it's.
And
it's a
that's
great
good that
tool.
it's been moved up.
Yes.
It still seems a long ways away,
It's a
but
constant,
it's good to,
it's a constant conversation, yes, because I think. As we had a meeting conversation with the minister, we wanna be a priority in getting there for sure.
absolutely, and yeah, that meeting that we had, that was interesting.
Yeah.
But okay, no other comments on it, questions on it?
Just a quick
Susan?
question, what's the thing that's keeping it from moving faster, like what's the biggest?
The ministry has set a schedule for the rollout of across the province, and unfortunately, we're towards the bottom end of that for their own reasons. And we keep emphasizing, we're ready, we wanna be out there, this is important to us. I think there's a few services that are doing that, and we're constantly in communication with them about if we can be sooner, we wanna be sooner, right, Adam? I think that's the best way to say it.
And
We don't get to set the schedule, Brian, is my
And
problem,
there's
Yeah.
nothing that we can do to move it along.
other than be helpful.
Advocate.
Other than advocate, say we're ready and let's go.
right.
They know that.
And they definitely.
Oh, they
They know
definitely.
They knew when it was clear, yeah. Okay, if there's no other questions,
Oh, no, I'll just move it.
moved by Susan, seconded by John, all in favor, carried. Next is ambulance offload time. It's rearing its head again,
Yes, however. So what we see when. Our ambulance offload delay times, this is something that is not new for us to discuss with the board. But we also want to draw reference that this is not something that we take our eye off of. It's such a significant pressure, we do not want to, turn our back to it, and we certainly don't want to take for granted any of the strategies or mitigation measures that we've put into place. We saw ambulance offload delays peak in 2023. That's one, and then in November is where we went live with the mitigation strategies. We worked we spent a lot of time working in the background on what we could potentially do. Went live, we saw almost instantaneous improvement within those offload delays. So we know the strategies work. Now it's about the maintenance of it and also the continuous improvement that come along with them. So with that, we do see certain periods of time, which is what this shows when we're looking at our offload delays. We do see that there are periods of time where the systems come under strain, so that we see our volumes increase, but then we also see that the hospital systems come under strain as well. And we see an increase in offload delays. We have enough information and data available to us now that we can actually identify what some of those system strains are. And we can provide that information, that feedback directly to LHSC and the hospital systems to be able to help or to navigate those challenges internally. So while we're watching these, we still continue we have meetings with LHSC on a weekly basis, but we also continue to meet with the Ministry of Health, Ontario Health, and LHSC as well, to review what is happening, what's taking place, and what is going to be done when we see these blips, and to make corrective action in the moment, as opposed to waiting to see it increase.
That's the day-to-day, what Adam's describing is the day-to-day conversations that we have, like regular conversations. But there's also the risk of the broader system changes. And so we also have fairly regular meetings that I've reported out to the board, that we have one coming up with the senior executive of LHSC. Where we talk about where they're headed as an organization, their budgetary challenge, sort of the big overview piece. So there's the down and in about making sure we keep the principles in place, but also the big overview piece too, right, Adam?
Yes, so
And that's
yes,
big important piece.
right, so we do speak with them on a daily basis, but we also have quarterly meetings with the Assistant Deputy Minister of Health, Vice
Yeah.
President from Ontario Health West. As well as the presence from LHSC specifically for these purposes.
Because they're our partners, we can't do this alone, they're the big piece of our partnership, and the good news is, we've had. Great response from LHSC on, you know, their willingness to meet with us and to continue to try to do the right things and partner with us on all these things, so. It's kind of exciting that we're in that space compared to where we were. You know, a couple years ago, we're in a different space with LHSC and the ministry.
So the point of, or the key messaging that comes from the report is also that we do see some spikes in the volume of offload delays. We do see some increasing trends, but we're also actively engaging with LHSC and the province to make sure that we do everything in our power to make sure that those mitigation measures become codified into what is happening within the hospital systems, and that we do not return to the previous levels that we had before.
That's the big thing, we're talking to each other.
Yes.
Right, the conversations are happening now, that weren't happening before.
They're happening on a quarterly basis, they're happening in the meetings that Bill's referring to, they're happening on the day-to-day instantaneous ones as well, where if we see issues, we're dealing with them in the moment if we can, and then we're following up in the larger meetings to make sure that, you know, the new strategies are maintained and there's no backsliding.
Yes.
Could I go as far to say, because there was always conversations going on, but whether or not. There was actual action happening because of those.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I get a sense when I talk to you about it, when you present that, you know, you have the conversation, you address it, and they are actually working through it, as opposed to maybe just sugarcoating what's going on or trying to appease you, right?
Correct. Those are the changes that we've seen since we put these into, since November of 2023, when we went live with these. We showed that all of that hard work that we did leading up to that is effectual. And now when we're actually being able to see those, we have more than a year's worth of information and data, and we were able to actually map out where LHSE is under stress and where these points are. We can pinpoint back to them. We know what's causing some of these issues, and now they're able to, there's accountability, I guess is the way. There's accountability that's coming with it. And they're being asked to speak to that accountability, and they're not just being asked by us, they're also being asked by the Ministry of Health.
But
to account for
the
it as
big
well.
challenges we face aren't necessarily as much to your point, at the implementation level. The big risk I see is we're the mouse compared to the elephant, and if they have some huge challenges budget wise, and if anything changes with the implementation of how things have been done, we will feel it here, and there's no bigger risk you have from a budgetary perspective, morale perspective, human resource perspective, than if something changes. And it could change in a heartbeat, Brian, like it could just be all of a sudden a decision to go in a different direction, and it won't matter about implementation then. So that's why these meetings with the LHSC about, hey, let's all figure out how, and we have a responsibility too. Like the conversation we're gonna be having with LHSC is, how can we work together to convince the ministry to have less go into the emergency room? What are the work we can do with CP? What are the work with some of the other programs that we're having? So we have a responsibility to them, and they have a responsibility to us. And I think at my level anyways, the big thing is we understand that collectively together. The conversations are very, very understanding, as opposed to, that's your problem. Because we all could just do that. We could all just take our ball and go, hospital, that's your problem. Paramedics, you just deal with whatever it is we send your way. But that's not what's happening. So that's good news.
Good news for the public.
Yeah.
Other questions? On the offload? Nothing else? We need to accept that. Susan, Kathy, all in favor?
I'll move the accountability.
What's our next one? Oh, sorry, response time performance.
Yes. So with our response time standards, we take a look at, or we have a requirement to report on our response time standards to the Ministry of Health. We also have so it's within MLPS and through the board that we set those response times to be, with all of them, with the exception of sudden cardiac sudden cardiac arrest and C-test 1. The times are set by the Ministry of Health. We set the percentage of success is set by the board as to what they would like to do. We do monitor those closely as well. Right now, MLPS is continuing to exceed all of the response times that we have. I think a lot of that is also attributable to some of, or to the mitigation measures that we put into place for offload delay and some of the enhancements that we've done through our deployment and through, the implementation of rapid response units. We've increased our response times to the community. It's a good news one too.
Good news.
Yeah, it's a moving target all the time, isn't it? It really is, and I look at some of these things we've talked about with these reports are so important for those response times. Like you said, the iPads and the different software, especially with, all the construction going on and all the things that are happening. Yeah, it's,
Well, whenever we get, like, I'm really excited about October, because we're gonna talk about Survivors Day and some of the other things for October. In our next meeting, I think, we have it on the agenda for the next meeting, whatever that is. But a real huge shout out to that rapid response unit and the impact it's having across this community. If we talked about it at the beginning, and isn't this gonna be great? We're gonna be in October being able to say, wow, this is, to use that term, game changer. It really is in terms of the service and celebrate all of that. So yeah, there's a lot of great things happening that the public needs to know more about. Because we just talked about how great it was gonna be. Now we need to show, and the good news is we can. It wasn't just all hot air. It really has been. So just a shout out to those folks that are doing rapid response.
it's been above expectations, I'm sure. It's above expectations.
Yeah,
It is.
Yeah, so it's, okay, anything else that was on that time? Nothing else? John, Mike, all in favor? Great, we're making that a lot quicker. Okay, and here's the one that I really, the construction combination.
yeah, I kind of mislabeled this, I guess, Brian. It's really the county building construction,
Yeah.
its impact on the MLPS headquarters. It was a little bit of a surprise to us just how much, and I think I communicated this to the board, just how much impact there was going to be. There was a shift in the building design since the last time I was a county CAO. And knew what was going on, and the design, not the design, but the site plan
Yeah.
changed and shifted over into the parking lot that we had, and Kelly and I don't have too much here to begin with, but that was an interesting day when we found out that we're gonna lose 2 full rows of parking for 2 years in a already depleted parking situation. So that's the bad news. The great news is that we went into scramble mode because we had a lot of, and they also told us we had, I don't know, 36 hours to address the situation. So we scrambled in everybody across the board, from education to logistics to our paramedics, adapted amazingly to this new challenge, because the change, we talked about change. It's not easy, and we asked them to do things, in some respects, we asked them to change work locations for some events. And we went kind of too far at the beginning because we didn't know the magnitude of the problem, and the magnitude of the problem around construction will ebb and flow. What you see today when you're here is an ebb, and it might be a flow tomorrow, and we have to be ready for all of that. So I think we're in a position now where we practiced everything. We can't have zero footprint here, but we practice different levels of footprint here depending on what's happening, and we can adapt if we know. And I think our communication with the construction company has been excellent. And we're trying to understand, have them understand, we need to know like 5 days in advance at least when you're gonna tear out the front, like today, and so that's been helpful. But again, the logistics group has done an amazing job of adapting and reorganizing how they do things so that we're safe, because we have heavy vehicles that are moving here, and we have one entrance and one exit, and we have one flow through lane. And it's very, very busy here at 6 and 7 in the morning. And they've done a great job of having great safe procedures that are also efficient. And in some ways, we've tried to find new ways to create even more efficiencies by how we set the vehicles up in the morning and how we do all of that. So really great to the group, and thank you for their accommodation of this challenge. But it's 2 years of change, so that we have to get used to, and they're accommodating it.
Question, Kathy?
So you mentioned about the shift in the building and the change to the parking and everything. So you've seen now what the design looks like, I assume, and like how traffic's going to flow when it's completed?
Yes, and I think that the conversation I've had, I'll call it the county, because that's not me anymore, but, the conversation I've had with them about that is. We're definitely gonna need a secondary entrance and exit for the whole property, and I think they understand that and they're working towards it, so I would say that everything's a work in progress. And we're trying to be patient, but the long-term plan cannot be, in my view, what I see on the paper now, it's just not going to work functionally. So we'll just have to leave that and then reevaluate in a few months with what magic they're able to pull to help with that. But I just don't think with that volume of traffic and the fact, the way we're designed already on the space, that's going to work. So we've given them, fairly good constructive feedback on this. So we'll just have to wait for implementation.
Susan?
How much say do you have in that?
Zero, we're a tenant, right? So people need to understand that in our building that we're a tenant. And we're reacting to what the owner of the property is doing on the property. But I have some connections at the county, so we've been able to mitigate the best we can, and that's all we can do now. But the long-term plan has to change, there's no question.
Yeah, we can't do any negative effects to the service that we have here. It's simple as that.
Yeah.
Like, we have to make sure that if you would have come in a little earlier, you would have seen the excavator out front here, so it just left just a laneway for a car to get through. So it's pretty tight, so all part of this is, as you say, Bill, if they're bringing an excavator in, they're gonna wanna unload it out there on the street. And they can't leave their trucks sitting around, they gotta get them out of the way.
Yeah,
So it'll be an ongoing.
The worst case scenario is if we only have one entrance we only have one entrance, let's say. And if that gets blocked for any reason, then we have mitigation strategies, but they take time to implement. That's not great when you're in emergency service and you need time to implement mitigation strategies. So the great news is though that we're ready for it. We're just planning that it not happen by trying to all work together and think ahead.
And I think there is people working on a secondary
Options.
option as well.
We'll have this conversation again in 6 months and hopefully we're further down the road to finding those secondary options.
Yeah. Any other questions on that? It's just gonna be what it's gonna be, but we'll have to mitigate as much as we can.
Mhm.
Okay, John, your turn, is it?
No, I think it's Mike's
Turn, Mike's move it, seconded by John, all in favor? Great, thank you. Correspondence and information items, I don't think we have any correspondence for the board at this time. We need a motion to go into closed for negotiations, update labor relations of employee negotiations. In accordance with subsections 239(2)(d) of the municipal act. And also 6B is MLPS paid vacation accrual management program. Or the PVTAM.
Oh, you're welcome.
Who came up with that?
That was me.
All the acronyms.
If they have a mover to go into closed. Kathy, Mike, all in favor? Carrie, thank you. Thanks, Sue. See you later.
See you, Sue.
Just 1 minute, please.